With that, viewers, we are shifting focus towards what's taking place within the United States of America. The U.S. Senate has now passed legislation to terminate U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs against Brazil. The measure was approved 52 to 48 in the Senate and is expected to end the national emergency that Trump declared back in July. This emergency was issued in response to Brazil's prosecution of their former president, Jair Bolsonaro, over an alleged coup attempt. Meanwhile, the bill now moves to the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, where it may face strong opposition. But it is important to note that 5 Republicans have still backed the bill in the Senate. Now, reacting to Trump's tariff policies, Democrats have argued that these could potentially drive up the cost of essential goods for American consumers. However, Republicans warn that removing the tariffs could weaken U.S.'s negotiating power in future trade deals. Now, the Senate vote comes as Trump continues his diplomatic tour in Asia, including, as we've seen earlier, meetings in Malaysia and Japan and now in South Korea as well. There is a bilateral discussion with Chinese President Xi Jinping scheduled to take place tomorrow. With us on the broadcast is Dr. Jayant Menon, Senior Fellow at the ISAS Yusuf Ishak Institute, joining us from Singapore. Thank you so much for taking out time and joining us on NewsX World. Firstly, I'd like to address the economic aspect of this particular decision. Yes, the vote does have to go through the House of Representatives, but in case it does pass over there, from an economic standpoint, how could then lifting tariffs on Brazil impact the American consumer? Because Democrats are warning about the prices of essential goods rising as a consequence of Trump wielding tariffs as a weapon.
Right. Okay. So this is not even a proper hypothetical. It's not going to pass in the House of Representatives. But still, your question is valid in the following way. It does highlight how the current tariffs are actually being recognized as a burden on U.S. consumers. So I think having Republicans cross the floor in the Senate, at least, is a signal that there is growing recognition on both sides of the House that this is the case. But they won't overturn it in the House of Representatives. But this is a tariff that's being paid for not by foreigners, as Trump keeps repeating, but by U.S. consumers. I mean, the U.S. consumers are paying more for their coffee and everything else now because of these, particularly the ones on Brazil, because there's no justification, even economic justification for these tariffs. Brazil actually has a trade deficit with the U.S., and these tariffs have come in because President Trump is unhappy with the way in which his friend Bolsonaro has been treated by the courts in another country. So this is interfering or trying to interfere in the legal affairs of another sovereign nation. So this tariff is so wrong in so many different ways. And I think the vote in the Senate is a signaling device to that effect, even though it's not going to have any real impact. Trump will have to repeal the tariffs himself. This is going to have to go away.
Indeed, and you've pointed out that Republicans breaking ranks are sending some sort of a signal to Donald Trump, but you've also noted that this is likely to not take place in the House of Representatives itself. But what Trump is doing, speaking of the political arena within the United States of America, there's a procedure that has to be followed as far as tariffs are concerned. Trump has been signing, on the other hand, executive orders. Do you think he's trying to set some sort of a precedent, and now the Senate Republican leaders, at least a few of them, have recognized that this could pose some sort of a danger in the future as well if another president after Trump decides to go down this route, and there's some sort of a check and balance that is now being imposed?
Yeah, so the reality is that the U.S. president has a lot of discretionary power when it comes to, imposing tariffs and the like, but not complete carte blanche. I mean, as you say correctly, he has to justify it in some way. So far, he's claimed national emergency, and he's used, various provisions to justify these tariffs. The Section 301, which is, unfair trade practices, 232, which is national security, and then the IEEPA, which is his emergency powers because of this, national emergency, as he claims. And so that's being tested now in the courts. And if it goes all the way to the Supreme Court, we'll have to see what happens there. The numbers seem to be in his favor because he's stacked it with his own appointees. But that's where I think we are. It's not carte blanche, but he has a lot of discretionary power, but he needs to be able to justify them using one of these three different measures that all relate in some way to a national emergency. People are questioning the legitimacy of that claim of a national emergency. And that's what we see. Whether it sets a precedent or not, I think, that the jury is out. We'll have to wait and see. We have a very unusual person in the White House right now. I don't think, we have seen anyone like him before, wield the kind of discretionary powers in the past. Maybe the future will be different, but hopefully not.
Indeed, and speaking about Brazil as such, this of course stems from the fact that one of Trump's, favored leaders, at least someone who has enjoyed rapport with Jair Bolsonaro, was in fact found guilty of attempting a coup. There were in fact judges from Brazil's Supreme Court over whom visa restrictions were also placed by the United States of America during this entire debacle, tariffs of course being another factor. But coming to the tariffs and Brazil, it's likely to not pass, as you've mentioned, but what concerns does the United States then have about Brazil's agricultural sector? We do know that the US is concerned about the exports of soybeans, particularly from the Midwest area, which houses a majority of Trump's MAGA voter base. There's already a lot of flack that is being sent his way from some of his supporters who've pointed towards Argentina and Argentina's exports of soybeans to China. So how do you think all of this comes into play?
Right. So there's a few different issues here. So we've got with Brazil, I think the concern from the U.S. consumer point of view is the heavy reliance on a few key commodities that are not grown in the U.S. or produced in the U.S. And so it just makes no sense in taxing those types of exports from Brazil. As far as exports from the U.S. are concerned, soybeans is a major issue. And as you say, it hits his base, the red states, the agricultural sectors in the red states. And there, I think the negotiations with China will be critical because China is the one that can make a big difference. And currently, if the tariffs that are paused come into play with China, this is going to be very painful for agricultural exporters in the U.S. So that's where I think the soybean and other agricultural exports will play out. Trump is going to probably, and Trump and his whole team, they're going to probably want China to commit to buying set quantities of various agricultural products, as we saw in his first term. And this is, I think, something they'll want to push once more. And we'll have to see, whether that goes through. But as you said, China has already started finding alternative sources for its soybean and other agricultural imports. And so This is, they can switch back, of course, but they'll want to extract a lot from these negotiations with the U.S. I think they'll be looking, if the U.S. pushes hard to remove the controls on rare earths and critical minerals, China will be looking to also get the U.S. to start easing up on the controls it placed on technology exports, especially the super chips. And that's what started this response. That's what initiated this response from China on the rare earths, after all.
All right, Dr. Jayant Menon, I'd like to thank you for taking out time sharing your analysis